Lady Death is the gripping memoir of Lyudmila Pavlichenko, the most lethal female sniper in history. Dive into the harrowing and heroic account of a young Soviet woman who became a legend during World War II with 309 confirmed kills. This episode 2, Training. Due to my production experience, I was chosen as head of my group. Although I was already attending lectures, taking notes, reading the required literature, compiling reports for seminars, writing assignments, and preparing for tests and exams, these duties did not strike me as difficult. It soon became clear which subjects were my favorites: basic archaeology and ethnography, history of the USSR, ancient history, Latin, and, given a choice of 2 foreign languages, English. I recalled mother's lessons, and things went very well. After meeting the standards for the Voroshilov Marksman Badge and the GTO Prepared for Work and Defense program, which I had undertaken at the factory, university physical education classes presented no difficulty either. My student days were filled with fun and freedom, leaving a lot of time for such diversions as visits to the cinema and theater, variety concerts, art exhibitions, and relaxing evenings complete with dancing. Apart from that, we were all quite interested in politics and were very sympathetic towards the Republicans in Spain, who, from 1936, were engaged in armed conflict with local fascists and monarchists. The fascists were aided by Italy and Germany, and the Republicans by the Soviet Union. The newspapers reported frequently and in detail on events in this far-off southern country. Excellent articles were published in the newspaper Pravda by the journalist Mikhail Koltsov. He wrote about the feats of the international brigades and the aerial skirmishes between the pilots of the German Condor Legion and our own volunteer pilots flying Soviet aircraft. There were even tank battles on the flat plains of the Iberian Peninsula, demonstrating the technology of Italy, Germany, and the USSR. A wave of indignation was aroused by the barbarous bombing of the small town of Guernica in the Basque country. There was no military necessity to strike it. Nevertheless, in April 1937, more than 50 German airplanes launched an attack on the settlement, which was in the hands of the Republicans. The raid almost completely obliterated it. Many civilians perished. Later, the outstanding Spanish artist Pablo Picasso, who was shaken by this crime, created a painting titled Guernica. The work is now renowned worldwide. The story of the tragedy of Guernica troubled Russian hearts for a long time. Along with these emotions, we had to think about what a new war would be like and when it would arrive on our doorstep. I was in my 2nd year in the history faculty when I felt an impulse to refresh my skills in marksmanship, as they might come in handy. Fyodor Koshchenko advised me to attend the 2-year course at the Osoaviakim sniper school, which had recently opened in Kiev. Only those who had Voroshilov Marksman Stage 2 certificate could apply there. Applicants also had to supply a reference from their workplace or educational institute. A short curriculum, vitae, both signed off by the personnel department, and a note from a medical commission on their readiness for military service. I presented the required documents and was accepted. It soon became apparent that in this establishment I had every chance of ascending to new levels of manual firearms handling. Sessions were held twice a week, on Wednesdays from 6 to 8 in the evening, and on Saturdays from 3 in the afternoon till 6 in the evening. We were issued authorizations that served as passes to the school's grounds, and we were issued the dark blue tunics we were required to wear. All this was reminiscent of army rules, but we did not complain. On the contrary, we were infused with a serious attitude and an awareness of our responsibility, given the prospect of the lessons ahead. I will say just a few words about the sniper school program. It really did train Swazilanders, super sharpshooters, for service in the Red Army. 20 hours were devoted to politics classes, 14 hours to parade ground drill, 220 hours to firearms training, 60 hours to tactics, 30 hours to military engineering, and 20 hours to hand-to-hand fighting. Tests on the course content took up 16 hours. Cadets who passed the final exams with the grade excellent were included in special lists in city and district enlistment offices and periodically called up for refresher courses and shooting competitions at various levels. In general, snipers were not overlooked and were given consideration. But even so, up until the Great War for the Fatherland, we had few real aces in the country, experts who could hit the target with their first and only shot. Perhaps there were 1,500 or so. The first session on firearms training showed that the exercises we had practiced in our factory circle were only a prelude to marksmanship, very useful, but insufficient on their own. I recalled my old friend, the Makashka, with gratitude as I took up the Mosin Army magazine rifle, model 1891 1930th, often referred to as the 3-line. Of course, it was heavier, 4K Kui, without the bayonet, and longer, 1232 mm, and calibrated for a 7.6 2x 54 mm or cartridge with an initial bullet velocity of 865 meters per second and a range of 2000 meters. The grip of the Tumbu 3-line butt was less comfortable than that of the TO's 8. The recoil on one's shoulder was stronger, and on account of its greater weight and length, firing from a standing position was difficult. But that meant absolutely nothing. We had to know the ordinary Mosin rifle, with which the Red Army rank and file were equipped, like the back of our hand. Therefore, a certain amount of time, 10 hours, was devoted to studying its mechanism. I gradually got used to the 3-line. In the end, I could strip and assemble it with my eyes closed, even though the bolt alone contained 7 separate parts. The rifle's open back sight and front sight, protected by a ring-like hood, made it possible to achieve pretty good results when firing. The sniper's rifle differed from the standard one in only a few details. Firstly, it had an Emelianov PE telescope sight mounted over the barrel, a fairly long metal tube, 274 mm, with a weight of 598 g, with 2 regulating drums. Secondly, this modification meant that the scope prevented the magazine from being charger-loaded. The cartridges had to be put there, one at a time. Thirdly, the handle of the bolt stem was bent sharply downwards. There were also differences not visible to the eye. The barrels for the sniper rifles were manufactured from the best steel, processed on precision lathes for greater accuracy, while the components were assembled by hand and adjusted in a special way. At the end of my studies at the sniper school, that is, in 1939, we were introduced to the new models of weapons that were being delivered to the Red Army. They were the Simonov AVS-36 and Tokarev SVT-38 self-loading automatic rifles. The principle behind their automatic functioning was based on the use of powder gases, which always accompany the bullet as it speeds along the barrel. The rifles had detachable box-type magazines containing 10 to 15 cartridges. The only thing that gave rise to doubt among us and our instructors was the number of components in the AVS and the SVT, and also the construction of their mechanisms, which were very complex compared to Captain Mosin's model. I remember the first lecture on the subject known as The Essentials of Shooting, to which 25 hours were devoted in the program. We were sitting in class one day when a lean man of average height, aged about 40, with a prominent scar over his left brow, walked in. The monitor shouted, "Stand up, attention." The teacher introduced himself, Potapov, Alexander Vladimirovich, and briefly explained what he intended to teach us. Then, falling silent, he surveyed the auditorium with a stern glance and said, "I have heard that you shoot quite well, but remember, a good marksman is still not a sniper." Thus began our association with Potapov, the school's senior instructor. We found out that he had begun his military career in the Imperial Life Guard Chasseurs Regiment in St. Petersburg, where marksmanship training for the lower ranks was exemplary. For his feats on the German front in 1915 and 1916, he earned 2 St. George Crosses, 3rd and 4th class, and also the rank of non-commissioned officer. In the Civil War, Potapov commanded a company in a Red Army infantry regiment and was seriously wounded during the forced crossing of the Savash. In 1929, he was seconded from the regiment to teach the Komintern Weistrel tactical rifleman courses directed at improving the Red Army Command's structure. It was there that the first group in the country to study the sniper's art began to operate. But he did not get to serve in the army as a sniping instructor. An old wound played up, and battalion commander Potapov was demobilized. In this way, also Aviakim acquired a much-needed specialist. Incidentally, the Kiev Sniper School, within this large-scale, voluntary, public, patriotic military organization, was renowned, like those in Moscow and Leningrad, not only for the quality of its equipment and technical facilities, but also for its superbly trained teaching staff. Alexander Potapov was a big shooting enthusiast and a connoisseur and passionate devotee of weaponry, especially the Mosin 3-line, model 1891, 1930th. He set out his experience, observations, and reflections on the philosophy of sniping in a small pamphlet, Instructions for Sharpshooters, which was published in Kiev. Without question, Potapov was a born teacher. He kept a constant watch over the cadets, not only in lectures, but also on the firing range. He believed that theoretical knowledge and firing practice were, of course, absolutely essential, but they were not sufficient to rear a true professional. He or she had to have more than just a good eye, which is granted by nature, thanks to the individual peculiarities of the eyeball structure. They needed a special character, calm, balanced, even phlegmatic, and not subject to fits of anger, merriment, despair, or, even worse, hysteria. A sniper is a patient hunter. He takes just a single shot. If he misses, he can pay for it with his life. Potapov warned us that in a month he would discharge those who, in his view, were incapable of acquiring the cunning art of the sniper. This caused us some distress, but his teaching methods won respect as always. One might even say that we liked him. Therefore, we tried with all our might. At least, I tried. Aside from me, our group included 2 other representatives of the fairer sex. With us, he went out of his way to be polite, but as girls aged 19, 20, and 22, we tended to be frightened rather than cheered by this officer's courtesy. We suspected that we would be the first candidates to be eliminated. Things turned out differently, however. Those who ended up parting with their dark blue Osoaviakim tunics were a number of ill-bred lads, including 3 who held the certificate for first-class Red Army marksman. Potapov explained that he did not attach much significance to male-female distinctions among his pupils, and he was sure that women, not all, of course, were better suited to sniper operations. They were hardy and observant, and they were given enhanced intuition by nature itself. When undergoing military courses, women fulfilled all instructions precisely, had a considered and careful approach to the process of firing, and when it came to inventive disguises, which were so important for a sniper on the battlefield, they had simply no equals. The praise from the senior instructor could have turned anyone's head, but Alexander Vladimirovich gave us no time to enjoy it. He became stricter and more inclined to find fault with the cadets who remained in the group, and he gave more attention to each of us. He discussed refinements we had never even thought about. For example, he made us observe a construction site. A 3-story building was being built on Vladimir Street for number 25 school, and then tell him what the workers had managed to do over a 2-hour period, how the situation on the site had changed, where the new doors, window apertures, staircases, and internal walls had appeared, and what position would be most convenient for a shot to neutralize, say, the site foreman, who was running up and down the plank footways from floor to floor. Slowly but relentlessly, Potapov taught us to observe the surrounding world closely, to examine keenly the details of life's rapid pace, as if through telescope sights, to gain a conception of the whole picture from minor details. With this approach, there was always something losing its significance, receding into or merging with the background, or something would become particularly important. The true essence of every new object was made manifest, as if magnified by a lens. It sometimes felt as if our dear teacher was picking on me. There were times when tackling a task that did not lend itself to swift resolution, I would begin to get hot under the collar. I became irritated at having to spend more time and energy on something that seemed at first glance to be completely commonplace. Potapov would halt the training session and calmly, insistently, and even boringly start to analyze everything, to explain, to point out the error, and follow the way I corrected it. I was surprised at the extent to which he fussed around with me. The senior instructor replied, "From whom much is given, much is demanded." As I have no intention of describing here the whole complex of skills and abilities essential for a sniper, for a civilian readership there is absolutely no point. I will just mention that, apart from actual shooting practice, the school put a lot of weight on theory classes. We were introduced to the laws of ballistics. In particular, we were given an understanding of the mil. In distance estimation, were taught how to calculate the range quickly according to angles, using a special formula and the reticles of P telescope sights, binoculars, and periscopes. We were taught how far the rapidly rotating bullet would drift laterally during its travel from the muzzle to the target. We also memorized various tables. For instance, the table of excessive deviations from average trajectories. When firing the Mosin rifle with cartridges containing bullets ranging from light to heavy, and so on and so forth. Over 4 months of training, our group came together. Spring arrived and we began to travel not just to the firing range, but also was into the countryside, where the indefatigable Potapov arranged additional exercises on methods of camouflage. In some distant clearing, the cadets would unfold a tablecloth, placing on it bottles of lemon-flavored mineral water and lemonade, and setting out all sorts of foodstuffs brought from home. The senior instructor would give a lecture and demonstrate how to camouflage oneself in a natural setting. Sometimes we were actually unable to find him for half an hour or more. In those cases, we would shout, "We give in," and our teacher would emerge before us in some unimaginable yellow-green hooded overalls, adorned with tatters of cloth, dried twigs, and clumps of grass. Other times we would generally take a sniper's rifle into the forest and play a game we called bottle base. After the drink bottles were empty from lunch, we would set up one of them on its side in a cleft stick with the bottle's neck towards us at a distance of about 20 or 30 meters from the firing line. With a single shot, we had to knock out the bottom of the bottle, meaning the bullet was supposed to enter the bottleneck and, without damaging the sides of the glass vessel, emerge through the bottom of the bottle, which would be smashed in the process. Potapov would usually knock out the first bottle himself. Then he would hand the rifle to one of his pupils and the contest for accuracy and skill began. We had some very ambitious kids, generally very young, who would give anything to lead the field and win Potapov's praises. First, we were required to shoot from a kneeling position, planting our right knee on the ground and resting on our heel. Second, we had to support the rifle with a strap that went under the bent elbow of the left arm. In this way, the marksman could rest on the left knee and hold the handguard of the gun, having moved his or her hand closer to the muzzle. And all this demanded strength, stability, and good balance. Anyone who missed exited the game to the jests and laughter of those present. The victorious were rewarded by Potapov. They received a small chocolate bar and a witty comment. For a while, I did not have full confidence in my capabilities. Moreover, I do not like showing off or being the center of attention. For one of the postulates instilled in us by the dear teacher proclaimed, "Showing yourself is dangerous. The sniper is invulnerable, so long as he is unseen." The day came when I was the one to whom Potapov handed the rifle. Suppressing my nerves, I took the weapon, forced the butt into the hollow of my shoulder as usual, placed my index finger on the trigger, and, pressing my cheek to the comb of the butt, stared into the eyepiece of the telescope sight with my right eye. The PE sight provided fourfold magnification, but even so, the neck of the bottle faded between the 3 black lines and looked just like a full stop in bold type. All that was left was to rely on intuition, on that feeling for the target, which a sniper develops during the training process. Spending too long taking aim is a common beginner's error, and I had long rid myself of it. So everything went off exactly according to instructions, within a time of 8 seconds. Hold your breath, take aim and breathe out as you exert smooth pressure on the trigger. The rifle responded with the crack of a shot and a kick in the shoulder. The white sides of the bottle were still gleaming in the sun as before, but the base of the bottle was no longer there. "Well done, Lyudmila," said the senior instructor. "Can you repeat it?" "All right, let's have a go," I agreed, for I was overcome by the excitement. Potapov realized this and smiled. "Keep calm, my long-braided beauty." That was how the senior instructor sometimes jokingly referred to us girls in his group. "You have every chance of victory." The others quickly set up a new bottle in the fork. Potapov gave me a cartridge with a heavy bullet, and, opening the breech, I placed it in the chamber. Of course, the mechanism would work without fail. I would press the trigger, and under the pressure of the action spring, the striker would move forward sharply. Its end point, like the sting of a snake, would penetrate the ignition capsule at the base of the bullet. The powder charge in it would explode, and the bullet, fastened in a brass casing by a ring, would finally win its freedom. The day had turned out fine and sunny, and, yielding to my will, the bullets fired superbly. 3 bottle bases. That was my final score from the competition in the forest. To the envy of the other cadets, the senior instructor presented me not just with the chocolate bar, but also with a copy of his booklet, Instructions for Sharpshooters, autographed to Lyudmila Pavlichenko, my able pupil in fond memory, A. Potapov. I do not necessarily agree with this phrasing. After all, abilities are from nature, inborn, but when it comes to super sharp shooting, one should also add firmness of character, industry, diligence, restraint, and the persistent desire to learn. I graduated from the Snarnenstennes sniper school with respectable results. The certificate of completion, printed on coated paper and adorned with the round seal of a crest, included the names of the subjects and the grades. The black letters formed words that I was very pleased with. Practical shooting, excellent. Firearms mechanics, excellent. Tactical training, excellent. Military engineering training, good. Our graduation evening was relaxed, noisy, and merry. We talked about the future. Many of the lads intended to apply for military colleges. The girls planned to pursue shooting within the Soviet system, take part in competitions, and compete for the title USSR Master of Sport. However, it was already 1939. On September 1st, Nazi Germany attacked Poland and the Second World War began. The Poles resisted the invaders, but by September 8th, the Germans had nearly reached Warsaw. The siege continued for 20 days. Then the government fled to Romania, and Poland was completely occupied by the Germans. In April 1940, the Nazis marched into Denmark and Norway. With British and French help, the Norwegians held out for 2 months but capitulated in June. Then came the turn of Belgium and France. The German advance began on May 20th, and by the 28th, the greater part of the Belgian army had already laid down their arms. After the encirclement of the Allied British, French, and Belgian troops at Dunkirk on June 4th, 1940, the British retreated from the European continent to their own island, leaving to the victors all their artillery and tanks, over 60,000 vehicles, and up to 500,000 tons of military equipment and ammunition, as well as around 40,000 captured soldiers and officers. On July 22nd of the same year, the heirs of the valiant warriors of Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte surrendered Paris to the Fritzes without a battle. A blitzkrieg indeed, that is, a swift war. Observing the rapid downturn in European events, we could not avoid thinking that sooner or later the aggressor would descend on our own and the world's first worker and peasant state. Over our traditional evening cup of tea, my father, who had confidential information by virtue of his occupation, talked more and more often about the difficult times ahead. I argued with him, insisting that, in the words of the Civil War song, "From our native forest to the British Sea, our own Red Army is the best there can be," and that it would be a case of us fighting on foreign territory. As events demonstrated, father was right, and I, along with millions of other Soviet people, was drastically wrong. I can only explain my misplaced confidence as a reflection of the state of my own affairs, which were going magnificently. Because I was passing all my university subjects with excellent grades, I was permitted to combine study with work allied to my specialist subject. At the end of 1939, I was appointed to the position of head of the acquisitions section at the State History Library. Just as I had before at the Arsenal factory, I began once again to contribute towards the general family budget and to spend more money on my son, who had turned 7. I passed my 4th year exams in the history faculty, along with my fellow students in January 1941, with grades ranging from excellent to good. The management of the State History Library in Kiev offered me the opportunity of a lengthy 4-month secondment to the Odessa Public Library as a senior research assistant to support local research staff. I was familiar with the rich resources of this library, which was one of the oldest in Ukraine. I imagined that I would easily be able to write my diploma dissertation there on Bogdan Khmelnytsky, the Ukraine's accession to Russia in 1654, and the activities of the Pereyaslav Council. The following year, I was due to defend this dissertation at Kiev State University and receive a diploma of higher education. I prepared for my departure in the most joyful mood. Nevertheless, the conversations with my father had, fortunately, had an impact on me. Therefore, I put in my suitcase not only my passport, student card, and academic record booklet, but also my certificate of graduation from the Sniper School, our teacher's pamphlet, and a collection of memoirs titled Combat in Finland, which had been published in Moscow at the beginning of 1941. The train from Kiev to Odessa left in the evening. My whole family came to the station. Father was earnest and taciturn as always. Mother gave me some last words of advice on healthy eating. My sister Valentina and her young man Boris were whispering about something. My son Rostislav did not want to let go of my hand at all, and asked me to take him with me, promising to help me in my work. Tears were welling up in his eyes, and I tried to comfort him a little and cheer him up. I could not have imagined that I would be separated from him for almost 3 years. This concludes the second part of the story. Thank you very much for listening. What do you think of Pavlichenko's story? Please subscribe for more episodes and leave a comment.